So Phil, thanks for developing this presentation, doing all the research that you did on it. And I think it's going to be a presentation that is this is kind of independent contractor 101. I know it's a tempting thing to do to think you're going to lose all the problems of having an employee, but unless you're really careful, you can pick up a lot more of the problems that are out there, that's for sure. So here we go. That's what we're talking about. And just in case you wonder who you're talking to, which by this point, if people have been paying attention, they should know both Phil and myself. So we're going to take this. Phil, you'll take one and I'll take the other.
Yeah, let's dive into it.
Yeah, let's dive into it. So why don't you tell people, the basic definition of an independent contractor?
Sure. So kind of that's question one, what is an independent contractor? And an independent contractor is a self-employed individual or business that provides services to another entity under terms of a contract, is kind of the legal definition of it. But unlike employees, independent contractors, they have they work on a project by project basis. They have more control over the terms and conditions of their work, such as the hours they work, the tools they use, the locations where they work. Independent contractors are responsible for paying their own taxes, providing their own equipment, obtaining their own insurance, among other things. And the challenge is the exact definition of and classification of what an independent contractor is kind of varies by jurisdiction. Each state has a little bit their own different rules. So the way they do things in California is going to be different than the way they do things in Kansas City. So it's always important, if you're going to use independent contractors, to just consult with like either an attorney, a legal professional, or a tax professional, to just make sure you're in compliance with all the applicable laws and regulations.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And to know what those terms are that they are responsible for. For example, just to give a quick example, you cannot say, we're going to have a meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning and I want you there. Make sure you're there. No, not to an independent contractor. So how do you tell whether somebody is an independent contractor or an employee? So there are a lot of people in professions like doctors and dentists and accountants and contractors who are in an independent profession. They offer their services, as probably most of you do here, to the general public, and they are generally a contractor. However, whether they're your employee or somebody that's working for you is an independent contractor or an employee depends on the facts. And the general rule is that an individual is an independent contractor if and only if the payer has the right to control or direct only the result of the work and not what will be done or how it will be done. So if you are an independent contractor, you are self-employed. The earnings of a person who is working as an independent contractor are always subject to self-employment tax. And then you need to go to a self-employed individual's tax center to find out, what the rules are in your state. Now, you are not an independent contractor if you perform services that can be controlled by an employer. In other words, they can't say what will be done or how it will be done. And this applies even if you are given freedom of action. What matters is that the employer has the legal right to control the details of how the service is performed. So if an employer-employee relationship exists, regardless of what you're calling it, then you are not an independent contractor and your earnings are generally not subject to self-employment tax. And if you as a contractor are subbing out work to an independent contractor, that there can be big tax ramifications if you don't follow all of these rules, and your earnings as an employee are subject to FICA, typically Social Security and Medicare, and income tax withholding by the person that is setting that up. But if you're an independent contractor, you need to do your own self-employment tax and so forth. So, and I wish I could say, are there any questions? But you're not here right now, so we'll move on to the.
So it sounds like it's all negative, but there are advantages to using independent contractors. And the biggest one, the most glaring one, we run small businesses and we're trying to, we're not running nonprofits, we're trying to make money. And the way we make money is by reducing costs and charging more for the work that we do than what it costs to do the work. That's capitalism 101 for you. So one of the initial benefits, cost savings. Hiring an independent contractors can be less expensive than hiring employees because you don't have to pay for the employee benefits such as health insurance, paid time off, retire benefits. Additionally, you don't have to pay payroll taxes on their behalf, and you might not even have to provide them with equipment or supplies. An additional thing is flexibility. Independent contractors offer flexibility in terms of scheduling, workload, and typically they're hired for a specific project for a period of time. So this can be useful with businesses that have fluctuating workloads or those that need to complete a specific project on a tight timeline. So you might have landed a new contractor that's a temporary job, a new contract that's a temporary job, and you really don't need to go hire a new employee because the project's only going to last a couple weeks. An independent contractor might suit that solution instead of you going through the process of, putting someone on payroll, getting them on workers' comp, doing all the stuff that you have to do to bring in a new employee. Then a big part of an independent contractor is they provide specialized expertise. So independent contractors often have specialized skills or an expertise that can be difficult to find in traditional employees. This can be especially valuable for businesses that need to complete a specific project or task that requires specialized knowledge or experience. So an example of this is, let's say that you're hired to, someone left a couch at a job, at one of the job sites, one of the cleanup sites, and you specifically.
That would never happen. That never happens.
Oh, it totally happens, right? And there's some
And,
rumors are that some people are putting couches on job sites on purpose. But so instead of you maybe having your own employees go pick up that couch and sprain their back and create a workers' comp claim, or have to bring in a specialized vehicle to go pick up that additional debris, you might be able to find an independent contractor that you can hire to just come and bring that in and just outsource that work. So that's a really good case use of using an independent contractor. And then I am an insurance professional and I'm all about reducing liability, reducing risk and liability. Once you start using independent contractors, they're not considered employees. So they're responsible for their own taxes and insurance, and this can help reduce the liability and the administrative burden on hiring, on the hiring company. So kind of it is an advantage, but there is a little pitfall that we'll discuss in a future slide. But typically independent contractors have their own insurance. So in the event that they do something that can lead to a claim or a loss, it falls on them because they're the ones that performed the work.
So and an example of a place that I would call a pitfall here is, let's say you have sweeping routes and you decide, okay, I'm going to take one of these sweeping routes and I'm going to have this guy Bob is going to become an independent contractor. He either has a sweeper or he'll buy one. You might help him buy one somehow, and now the different of the clients on that sweeping route have different requirements for insurance. So if you've been doing the route yourself and you have met all those requirements for insurance, now Bob is an independent contractor out there with his sweeper. He does not have those liability insurance availability. So just be real careful about that. And let's say there was an accident or some such with the independent contractor, and his insurance didn't cover. You can bet that the client is probably going to come back to you, and you better make sure that all the T's have been crossed and the I's have been dotted for that relationship. That's for sure. So
And
let's.
I'll speak before you jump to the next slide, Ranger, is that is an advantage is if that individual, that independent contractor that they're using meets all those requirements, has all those in their insurance, if there is a claim, it falls on them because they're the ones that performed it. It doesn't, you're not picking up that claim. It's not hitting your insurance because they're the ones that performed the action. And that has a big time benefit on your side to not be stacking up claims that that you weren't necessarily directly at fault for.
Yeah, good point. So what are the disadvantages? You don't have nearly as much control, of course. Unlike employees, independent contractors have a lot more personal control over their work and how they complete their tasks. They can work on their own schedule, or they certainly may. They may use their own equipment, and they have a lot more autonomy over the work that they do. This can make it more difficult for somebody to control the quality of work performed and make sure that it meets what would be your company's standards. Is the independent contractor meeting those standards? Well, maybe, maybe not. In terms of availability, independent contractors may not be available when you need them, especially if they have other clients or they're in high demand. And that can make it difficult to complete projects on time and may require that you have to hire additional contractors or employees. Now, another part of an independent contractor is there is no long-term commitment to you. They are independent, so they're typically hired for a specific project or a period of time. They don't have to necessarily be available for future work. Not that employees can't say sayonara and leave too, but it's a little bit of a different situation. So that can it can make it more difficult to build a stable team situation, and it may require that you continually seek out new contractors, to complete tasks. Misclassification is another risk. If you have misclassified a worker as an independent contractor, when in fact they should be classified as employees, it can definitely lead to legal and financial consequences, which can include fines and back taxes and potentially even lawsuits. So it's important that you carefully evaluate the nature of the work being performed and ensure that any workers are properly classified. And lack of loyalty. They're not employees, and so they may well not have the same level of loyalty or commitment to your business because it's not their business. They're an independent contractor. And so they may prioritize their own interests over the interests of your business, and certainly may not be as invested in the success of your company. And we go back to quality of work that way too. So anything you want to add to that, Phil?
That's good.
All right.
So how does that independent contractors, how does they affect the contracts that you have with your clients? So this starts right off with the responsibility for work. So when you do hire an independent contractor to perform work on behalf of your company, it's important to make clear that the contract and the contractor is responsible for the work they perform. So this means that if there's any issues or problems with the work, the contractor, not you, the business owner, is responsible for addressing them. So for instance, you do sub out some work, that there is an issue with the subcontractor that they use, that subcontractor is both the client and the subcontractor are aware that it's their responsibility to resolve that because they're the ones that perform the work. Another thing is confidentiality and non-competition. So you might have some contracts with clients that include provisions related to confidentiality and non-competition. If an independent contractor, now these independent contractors will have access to this confidential information, or they could potentially be performing work that can compete with you. So it's important to include when you do hire on an independent contractor that you have some wording in your agreement with them that they can't poach your clients and they can't go directly solicit clients. In my own experience, I've hired a plumber to come do work for me, and the plumber ended up telling me after he did the job on behalf of the plumbing company that I paid to do the work, he said, "Hey, if you ever need some work done, here's my direct number and just call me direct." And that in essence took away business from the plumbing company. So when you are hiring independent contractors, make sure there's some wording in your contract with them that makes it where that if they if you find out they try to solicit the customers that you sent them to do work for and they try to directly solicit them, you have some legal protections on there. Another thing is time frames. Independent contractors, they can work on their own schedules. They may not be available to meet the same deadlines that an employee would have. So technically, when you use an independent contractor, they can go do the work whenever they want. And even though you might say, well, our client needs you to be there at 9 o'clock or 9 p.m. to go sweep their parking lot, and they don't have to be there at that time, like legally. Whereas an employee, you tell an employee to be somewhere at a certain time, they have to follow the rules of the lands that you set up for them. So it's just important to communicate any scheduling limitations to clients and ensure that all contracts reflect realistic time frame for completing work. And then, Ranger addressed this in previous slide, but like the quality of work, independent contractors may have different work styles and approaches than employees. You can if it's an employee and an employee performs a task, you can go and do a QA, a quality review, and say, hey, this is great work, I'm going to give you a raise, or this is terrible work, you're no longer going to work for me. Whereas an independent contractor, you don't control their quality of work, and that might affect your relationship with the customer. They might have certain standards and that independent contractor isn't meeting that standard, and now you are in breach of contract. So let's say part of your job included, not only sweeping, but also picking up some large debris that was left over, but the independent contractor only did the sweeping job and left the couch in the parking lot. Well, now you've potentially breached the contract that you had with your client, and that can definitely affect you, whether it may make you lose a client or it may give the client that you have the ability to not pay you the full amount that you were expecting. And that ties into like all the contractual obligations. The use of independent contractors may affect the business's ability to meet these contractual obligations with clients. So it's important to carefully evaluate the impact of using independent contractors on existing contracts and to communicate any changes or potential issues that you have with clients. The last thing you want is to get sued by because the person that you hired to do work did not perform to your agreement and to your contractual agreement and obligation to your customers.
And the breaching of an independent contractor relationship could be, let's go back to the guy didn't pick up the couch, or let's say he didn't sweep the back of the loading dock or something like that. So you call him up and you say, hey, you didn't sweep the loading dock, meet me over there at 2 o'clock this afternoon and we need to go over this. Well, for one, the guy can say, I'm busy at 2 o'clock. For two, if you required that he was over there at 2 o'clock, takes away some independence.
Yep.
So you have to be careful of things like that. Go ahead, Phil.
No, that's it. He's an employee. Once you start forcing them to be somewhere or do something a certain way, you've lost that they're no longer independent contractors. And even if you 1099 them and whatever it might be, you've now given that quote unquote independent contractor the ability to go after you as an employer down the road. And they can say, hey, Ranger told me to be here at 2 o'clock. And he said, if I wasn't going to be here, I was going to get fired. Well, you can't fire independent contractors. They're not employees. So you got to be careful, not only with what you have an independent contractor do, but also the language that you use with them. You do not want to use words like you're fired or I'm not going to pay you. Like, you just got to be very careful, because you can set up a situation that gives this independent contractor the ability to like treat you like an employer, which gives them a little bit, more protections under both federal and state law.
Okay. So what's an example? We just had a couple kind of an independent contractor relationship going bad. So there are many. They failed to complete the work as was agreed to, or they performed poorly, or they caused some kind of harm or financial loss to either you or to your clients. For example, let's say a business hires a independent contractor, and we'll go out of the industry to develop a new software application. The contractor says, we'll complete it within a specific time frame, and here's the specific cost. However, they fail to complete the work on time, quality is subpar, etc. So as a result, you as a business might be unable to meet your obligation to your clients, who are relying on what you told them about the software, how much it would cost, and when they would get it, on their platform. And so that certainly has a chance to harm your reputation or, create a financial loss. Let's say another one, independent contractor, you hire them to perform work on a construction project. They don't get the right permits, or they violate safety regulations. There's resulting in damage to property, or their workers get injured. In both of those examples, the use of an independent contractor can result in negative consequences for you as a hiring business, and that really highlights the importance of selecting those people very carefully and managing them very carefully, and ensuring that your contracts all reflect the terms of whatever that relationship is. If you're an independent contractor, you're self-employed, and the earnings of a person working as an independent contractor, he has to pay self-employment tax. And so if just to kind of as a recap, because you can't learn this too many times, you are not an independent contractor if somebody performs services that can be controlled by an employer. What will be done, how it will be done. And that applies even if there's freedom of action. What matters is that the employer has the legal right to control details of the services. And so if an employer-employee relationship exists, regardless of whatever you're calling the relationship, then you are not an independent contractor. Your earnings are generally not subject to self-employment tax. Of course, they would typically be subject to FICA and Social Security, Medicare, income tax withholding. So,
I'll share a story of a real life independent contractor situation going really bad. It was a construction job, and the independent contractor subcontractor was told by the general contractor that they were not allowed to use the crane. They took the keys, they locked the crane up, but the independent contractor on this crane, it was like a universal key. They had another key to this crane because it was a really easy piece of heavy equipment that they were able to access. So this independent contractor went to the job after the job site was closed with one of his coworkers and knocked the guy off the scaffolding with this crane. And a guy fell about 4 stories with major surgery, and it ended up becoming $1 million claim. And they were able to show that it was negligence on behalf of the general contractor. So the person that hired this independent contractor, they said that they did not provide a safe work site, and they ended up getting sued, and their insurance had to pay out $1 million, even though the sub was the one that caused the claim, that caused the problem, that knocked their own employee off a scaffolding that broke a guy's back. So it goes to, like, as Ranger said, you got to be very careful on who you're going to doing business with, because if they get hurt or they cause damages, someone's going to have to pay the piper. And in many cases, you're ultimately responsible for that, because you're the one that had the contract with the responsible party that was paying for it, and they're not going to pay it. If you're doing work for Walmart and one of your independent contractors gets hurt on the Walmart parking lot, trust me, that contract that you have with Walmart's pretty bulletproof, and Walmart's not paying it. So, and there's no way they're going after those high-level lawyers. They've played those games quite a bit.
Yeah, we've all seen that. Okay, here's the kind of trouble you can get into.
Yeah, this is the stuff, right? This is the real, I would say, the reason why we Ranger and I felt that this was important to discuss this topic is there's a lot of benefits, there's disadvantages, but this is the the keys. There's fines and penalties for not paying taxes or workers' compensation. I see quite a bit in this industry. An audit gets done by the workers' compensation or the general liability carrier, and then the sweeping contractor doesn't have certificate of insurance of all their independent contractors. So because they don't have those workers' comp certificates, they just do an audit and they apply all that 1099 payroll. They apply it to the workers' comp, and you're now being treated from the workers' compensation insurance company as them being employees, and it's a very big penalty. Even worse is, what if you don't have workers' compensation because you sub everything out and you use independent contractors? And then it turns out that one of those independent contractors gets injured. And then they go have bills and they go and say, hey, I was doing work for Bob Sweeping. And you say, well, no, you were a 1099 person. So what would happen is, you can start getting fined by OSHA for every day that you did not have workers' comp. And those are retroactive penalties, and they get crazy. Like in some states, it's like $500-600 a day that you were operating your business without workers' compensation. And that's $500 or $600 a day per employee. So if you had 10 independent contractors, in the case of a discovery of an independent contractor that was injured doing work on your behalf, and you didn't have workers' compensation to even protect you, now you're not only getting an audit, that you're not getting an audit, now you're getting fined by the state, and that can have some like long-term consequences financially and reputationally, because they usually the jurisdictions that you're in, they usually showcase and highlight when those scenarios happen in their area to prevent, they shame you. You're going to get known in the area as the sweeping contractor that didn't have workers' compensation for their employees, even though you might have considered them as 1099 independent contractors. So in addition to workers' compensation, there's taxes. They can end up being qualified as employees, and you might now have to go pay back taxes. I had a good friend of mine who had a business. It was in California and in Pennsylvania. They had 2 locations, and in California, they satisfied the California independent contractor laws, and they were able to 1099 their employees in California. But Pennsylvania did not accept their definition of independent contractor, and the IRS ended up showing up at their business with an armed IRS agent, and as every day as they took in money, the money had to go right to the IRS. They just confiscated all of their revenue because they weren't properly paying taxes on the independent contractors. So after 5 years of having 1099 employees in a certain state, it not only created back taxes, but it created penalties and it created interest. And it was a significant number, such a large number that the IRS just started confiscating all of their revenue directly from them. And then you can get civil lawsuits. So in addition to fines and penalties that are imposed by the government agencies, the failure to pay taxes or provide workers' compensation insurance can also result in civil lawsuits. So let's say that this independent contractor was doing work on your behalf. They get in a car accident. That's their fault. They're now injured. They can't work again. They didn't have workers' compensation. You didn't have workers' compensation. And now they're injured, and they can convince, or a lawyer can convince a jury that you were in fact an employer. You are now putting yourself in a position where you could get sued in a civil lawsuit. And obviously, if a lawyer is taking it on, they're in there to try to get as much money from you as possible, and that's what they get paid to do. So it's just important for you to comply with tax and workers' compensation laws and regulations to avoid any potential fines and penalties. And that's where you need to talk, consult with a legal and tax professional. You can, if it comes to the workers' compensation and you want to get, some advice from an insurance professional, talk to your current insurance agent. Or if you're in a circumstance and you want to, get my opinion on it, feel free to, give me a call and talk with me about kind of any circumstance that you might need some more assistance on. But there's definitely financial ramifications, and sometimes those ramifications can potentially put you in a business where we're in a situation where you're such in a pit, like you just have to close the business down because there's so much fines and legal fees and everything, and it's there's only like so much money that can go around.
Yeah, well put. Well, there are some benefits on the other hand. Because saves you money. Contractors are typically, instead of you paying their, taxes, equipment, benefits, that kind of thing, get a lot of flexibility because you can hire them for just specific projects or time periods. And they're great when you need a specialized skill or expertise. You don't have it in-house. You don't, especially if you don't need it for a long term, get an independent contractor, get another contractor. There's a lot less administration needed with contractors because they're responsible for their own legal compliance and paperwork. And it does reduce the liability for your business because contractors are generally responsible for their own work and they have limited employment rights and that sort of thing. But just remember, as disadvantages, you lack control over their work schedule, their approach to doing business. You misclassify them as an independent contractor, and at some point they try to show they're an employee and win. Big problem. There's potentially a negative impact on employee morale if it looks like independent contractors are out there getting some kind of preferential treatment. And there's certainly challenges in maintaining a consistent quality of work across multiple contractors, if that's how you're operating your operation. And of course, it can possibly be negative on your client relationships if those people are not doing the job that the way it should be done, and or if you have any kind of communication or contractual issues, that sort of thing. Failure to pay taxes, big fines, big penalties, interest charges. The IRS can have penalties up to 5% a month on unpaid taxes. Adds up. Sometimes up to 25% of the total tax that's owed. They can file tax liens against you. Negatively affects your business, your credit rating, ability to get loans and credit. And in severe cases, failure to pay taxes is a criminal offense. So, as Phil said, with workers' compensation, if you fail to do that, properly report what are now seen as employee wages, all kind of penalties can happen from that too. I think in California, you mentioned that failure to provide workers' comp can get a fine up to $10,000 per employee, and failure to report employee wages can be $100 a day. So, and then civil lawsuits we talked about can be filed by an independent contractor or agencies or others, for failure to pay taxes, etc. So it's important that you comply with tax and workers' comp laws, and make sure that you talk to legal and tax people, your insurance provider, and that's with a plug for Phil here in BindDesk. He is very familiar with all of this, and that's one of the real reasons why they are the World Sweeping Association's endorsed agency for this, because he's done a lot of time to be able to have the expertise that it needs to steer you in the right direction. So, and remember, if independent contractors get confidential information of yours, or they're performing work that can compete, could be big trouble. There's usually with sweeping, you have time frames where the work has to be completed. You can suggest that, you can't make it so. That's a problem. And quality of work, you can suggest, but you can't make it so. Everybody has different work styles and approaches. And if you have employees, you can definitely make sure they're doing it exactly the way you say. Independent contractor, not so much. Not at all. And finally, contract obligations. When you use independent contractors, it could affect your ability to meet your contractual obligations with your clients. So really evaluate the impact of using them on your existing contracts, and communicate any changes or potential issues with clients, because it's your reputation that's really on the line here. So here's some tips you might find helpful. You want to handle this one, Phil?
Yeah, that's just pretty straightforward. Just classify workers correctly. Make sure you classify workers as employees or independent contractors correctly. This will help you avoid any legal, financial risks associated with the misclassification. Draft clear contracts. So just create clear contracts that outline the terms and scope of work, the payment, all the other details, and make sure to have the contractor sign the contract before starting work. Don't do things off of handshakes, and don't do things by word of mouth. Have a written agreement in place. Screen them. Screen these contractors carefully. Conduct a thorough screening. Get some background references. Like if you need to do a background check, if you're going to send an independent contractor onto a customer's premise, you should probably make sure that don't have a criminal record of theft, and they don't have you probably want to make sure you're not sending burglars off onto one of your clients. So just screen your contractors. Don't just take someone's word of mouth. Cross check what they're doing and who they're doing, and make sure that not only that they're reliable, but they're qualified. Like just because someone says they can do something, have them show it that they can actually do it before you just bring them on just by word of mouth. Communicate expectations. So just be clear about this. Inside of your expectation, include deadlines, quality standards, communication channels. Let them know how they got to do business. If they email, they phone, they text, however you do this, just make sure that you have you communicate your expectations, and then in addition on how you expect them to communicate with you, and maintain good communication. So just even when they're out in the project, just checking in. Hey, is everything going good? You have any questions? Great. Well, if you need me, here I am. Here's how you get a hold of me. I'm here to help. If you have any issues, let me know. If there's something wrong with the site, let me know so I can reach out to the client and take care of it. So just maintain good not only communicate your expectations, but definitely maintain good communication with them. Most problems happen when their communication goes south or you start ignoring them. And if it, even in the case if an independent contractor that you're hiring gets hurt or something, don't answer the call and say, hey, you are 1099, fix it on your own. Like, maintain good communication, try to help them with the problem so it doesn't become a legal problem. And usually that's when lawyers get involved, when someone's not helping them out and they need some help, so they go get legal assistance. And now you're giving someone, a shark, entry into your swimming pool, instead of you just fixing the problem and talking directly with the independent contractor. Provide all the necessary resources. Make sure to provide these independent contractors with all the necessary resources and tools to complete the project successfully. Whether that's training, whatever it might be, whether it's just kind of going and scoping out the site and showing them, how they do the job. Just give them everything they need to be successful with the work that you're hiring them to do. And then monitor their performance. Like, just because you hired an independent contractor, every now and then just go do a spot check on it. Make sure that they're doing the work. And then, when you're there and you show up and you see that they really, they're just sitting in their car because they want their GPS to show that they were at that location, but they really didn't even sweep the job. You're like, hey, man, I got a complaint from this customer that said that the job wasn't up to standards, and you're over here just like watching, playing on your phone and just trying to show a couple hours. So don't be afraid to monitor that performance. That's not violating the terms, as long as you let that independent contractor know that they should expect things like that. And then, of course, protect all your intellectual property. So this ensure that the contractor understands and agrees to protect your company's intellectual property, including any confidential and trade secrets, whether that's the way you get new customers, or if you have a really neat proprietary method to get the most benefit and like your secret sauce. Don't make sure you protect that. That's what sets you apart from your customer, from your competition.
Or it becomes your not so secret sauce.
Yeah. So overall, using independent contractors can be a great way to save money and access specialized skills and expertise. But it's important to approach it carefully, thoughtfully, and just ultimately, from a Ranger's standpoint and my standpoint, we want to just help you avoid potential legal and financial risks.
So I hope this is helpful, and anybody deciding whether to use independent contractors, or if you're using them now, you might I really encourage you to do an assessment and make sure you're following all the guidelines that Phil and I talked about. And thanks so much for Phil. And if you have insurance questions, or if you have any doubts about the quality of the insurance program that you're in now, would like a competitive quote, or work with somebody that really has expertise for not only the power sweeping, but the exterior maintenance and pavement maintenance business, get hold of Phil at BindDesk.com, as it says there. And he's really done a great job for us. And thanks for that, Phil. And you're going the extra mile by bringing this kind of information out to the community too. So that's even more important. So
thank you, Ranger. Keep up the good work.
All right. Thanks. And thanks everybody for watching, and stay independent if you are.
Thank you. Bye-bye.